Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Para Board. It is September 23rd, 5:07 p.m., and we're going to call the meeting to order. I believe that we should start a roll to check and see for attendance.
Chairman Figueroa is absent. Vice Chairman Rankin?
Present.
Ms. Fisilet?
Present.
Mr. Cohen? Mr. Cohen, you're muted.
Present.
Ms. Sarita?
Present.
Ms. D, you're muted.
Here, sorry.
Mr. Fontaine?
Present.
Ms. Sturgeon?
Swearengin, present.
Ms. Ray?
Miss Ray is trying to get in.
We'll give her a moment. Mr. Vice Chair, we can mark her absent at the moment, and when she joins, can you just please note that she has joined the meeting?
Yes.
We have 7 present, 2
8.
absent.
Oh, no.
She would have been 8.
Gotcha.
7 present and 2 absent. We have a quorum.
All right. See, I guess we have to read off the agenda for the evening.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure. Opening statements from Board Chair regarding recent events relative to Providence External Review Authority.
That first item's been read.
Is there a motion to amend the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, this is Tanita. I would like to amend the agenda, please, in the order. I would like to discuss the job performance first and then go to the financial review.
Can I just jump in? You don't actually have to make a motion to amend the agenda if you're just taking things out of order. So if you want to just start with the last item, that's totally fine. You can do that. Also, since it's the chairman's report, which is on the agenda, and obviously Mr. Figueroa is not here, if you want to just skip that item, you can just skip that item.
I make the motion to skip the item and start off with the performance, number 5 first.
Second.
Motion is so passed. Any, I'm sorry. Voting.
Who seconded it, please?
I believe it was Mr. Rita.
Thank you.
All in favor?
All in favor? Sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Any abstentions?
I guess the motion carries.
Would you like us to read the item into the record, Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes, please.
Discussion relative to the job performance of Providence External Review Authority, Executive Director Jose Batista.
Also, can we have a copy of the transcript of this meeting sent to all the board members?
I'm not sure what you mean by a
A
transcript of
printout? We can just download it, correct?
the minutes.
Yes.
When the minutes are compiled, we can certainly, we usually distribute those to the members anyway, but minutes are just basically what was done, not everything that was said. For that, you would just need to listen to the audio.
Okay.
And this will also be up on YouTube as well, and we're live streaming right now.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. Okay, so I guess we should just get down to it. The order of business is about discussing the performance of the executive director, and a question has arisen about the Sergeant Hanley video and procedures that were involved in the distribution of that video. And it is the understanding of this board that the executive director requested that the attorney general drop the charges, the simple assault charges against Sergeant Hanley, so that this video could be viewed by the public. And the question is, in what way was that a benefit to Mr. Gore, the citizens of the city of Providence, protesters on the streets, and the board itself?
All right, so good evening, everybody. So the question is, in what way was it beneficial to, I guess, any and all parties to do that, to dismiss the charges? I guess I'll just take one step back. As far as I can recall, I don't think that I ever told the Attorney General to dismiss the charges. I remember having a conversation with him on the phone pretty early on about the Hanley case. And I suspected from the beginning that the prosecution of Mr. Hanley was in one way, shape, or form going to get in the way of the public being able to access the video. And sure enough, it has. And the one specific conversation that I had with the Attorney General, where I suggested a hypothetical grand bargain, which was the exact language that I used, that would include a quick resolution of that case by dismissing it. And I'll explain more about why I suggested that in a minute. But not just dismissing it, dismissing the case as a means to get rid of the obstacle to releasing that video to the public. That's what I hypothesized about. I never told him to do it. I asked it as a question, would it be worthwhile to consider this? I think, and I still believe it's a question worth having, because as this board has put out a statement in the past, there is at least some reasonable question as to whether the charges that were brought actually fit the nature of what happened. I don't think that by itself dismissing the case would be good. It's not something that I want to see happen. It's not something that I've mentioned ever again. But it was simply a means to an end that I suggested considering, given that this prosecution, again, doesn't match the facts, could always be brought back. If they dismiss it once, Rhode Island is what we call a two-tier state, where you can dismiss a case and within a certain amount of time decide to recharge it. I've seen it happen in my own career with my own clients. And so to the extent that I ever suggested or advocated that we dismiss that case, that was the only context and only singular incident in which that happened.
On August 18th, in a Zoom call between myself, Mr. Rita, you, and Chairman Figueroa, and contractor Montero, you had expressed concerns that because you had requested the dismissal of those charges, that we couldn't charge upwards, so to speak, and that your concern was that that request to drop those charges could become a negative for yourself and the board.
As I recall it, again, August 18th, I do remember the Zoom call. I don't remember the exact words of what I said, but I remember thinking is that I had been told that those words were going to be used against me. I had been told that those words were going to be misrepresented and used against me to try to dilute our request to make the video public. And so that's what I believe I said. That's what I know is the truth. And that's what I have to say in response to that.
I'm sorry, this is Mike Fontaine. I'm just kind of wondering, first off, you're saying this was a hypothetical, but you made this hypothetical to Peter Nerona. I'm just a little taken back by how making any request to not hold a police officer criminally accountable would be releasing a video, which would have, when there's no accountability, would be beneficial to anybody. And then my second part of that is, who said you could do that? I mean, I've never heard this come up as opposed to the board. I've never heard it come up in any respect, in any situation whatsoever. And I especially am addressing this because I know that I had been saying that this could be upcharged. So, I don't understand that answer where you're saying I talked to him hypothetically. And I mean, how was he taking a hypothetical if he's going to come back and say to you, according to what I just heard, well, because you said that, I'm not going to go up on the. If I'm understanding this correctly, I'm not going to go up on the charge because you came and asked me to do this. I mean, I don't even know where the authority was to go and make that statement to him.
Well, so I'll say a couple things about that. I want to try to be. I'm going to answer the question as honestly as possible, as much as I remember it. I have nothing to hide about it and nothing to be ashamed about. We may have ultimately a fundamental disagreement as to some aspect of this, and that's fine. We can discuss that. I do want to, however, try to respect what was the presumed privacy of the conversation that I had with the Attorney General on the phone and the presumed privacy that we had on the Zoom call. And so I don't want to get into, well, this is what the Attorney General told me or this is whatever. But yes.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. And I'm not asking you to do that. And I just want to make sure that my thing back to you is clear. I'm not asking that you disclose a conversation you had at the last Zoom call. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to jump on you, but I know that I've been talking about these charges for some time. And the last time we had a Zoom call with the Providence Police Department, you were talking about how you had this bad conversation with the Attorney General, et cetera. Was this the conversation that you're talking about?
So as it pertains, as what is relevant to what we're talking about now, there were two separate conversations. The initial one where I had a conversation with the Attorney General about this case, how serious it was, what was going to happen. Obviously, the criminal prosecution is one angle of it, but the public accountability aspect, I think, is a separate angle. Later, on a separate conversation, when I expressed that the board had wanted to put out a statement suggesting that the Attorney General increase the charges, my own words were thrown back at me, yes, in the form of, well, Jose, how could you, on the one hand, suggest or even hypothesize that we dismiss this case, and on the other, suggest that we increase the felony charges? And to which I responded very happily then and very happily now, what I'm saying are not two in, what I'm saying is not mutually exclusive. If you choose to prosecute this case, which is a choice, one that is often bragged about how serious the police department took this and wanting to prosecute it criminally. If you're going to do that, then the position of this board is that the charges that were used are not enough. However, if you would like to be a person who looks beyond what is on the surface and looks at the severity of this issue, which is playing out across the country, not just in Providence, then it might be worth considering what I called a grand bargain, where we involve the community, we share this video with the public, to the extent that the prosecution is being used as an excuse not to release the video, forget the prosecution, drop it for now, let the public in on this conversation, which they deserve to be in on, and then we can figure out what we're gonna do with the prosecution after that. There is nothing inconsistent between those two things. If you wanna ask about authority or who can do what, I mean, let's clarify that, because I don't see anywhere that.
Well, listen, if you're saying to me if there's nothing inconsistent with that, there's something wildly inconsistent with that. You're going into the top law enforcement official in Rhode Island, you tell them to drop a case so we can display a video. Now, if you look at the other things that's been going, first off, I don't recall this board ever having any conversation about dropping this case under any circumstance. If you look at every other situation in the country right now where there is a video, everyone's clamoring for charges should be filed. Now, we can discuss the level of charges, but saying that we can drop the case for now and recharge them later, when I know we had other conversations on this board about the Attorney General saying, oh God, I just lost my train of thought about he's saying that I don't want to release the video because the investigation's going. So if what you're going to say, let drop the charge, let the video out, that's clearly what he's saying to this board, and what you relayed is that would affect the investigation, meaning it won't be as effective. So once that video's out, it's over. I mean, that's everything that you guys have brought back to this board. But I'm just, again, just hearing this, I'm a little taken back because, again, I was the one that was talking about these charges and this whole thing that we should just drop and let what I guess my point is this, and my question to you is this: how would it help the general public to see any sort of violence? We're not talking specifically about the video because we're not going to do that, but any sort of violence against any sort of citizen, but then possibly not hold the officer accountable by releasing that video. That was the whole point of this board, to my understanding, was to get us in place to try to have a second set of eyes to ensure officers are held accountable. So I don't mean to be jumping on you on this, but I'm just saying, if we're having this conversation, you're saying that, this is all the same, and, one thing does not have to not do with the other. Listen, I've been a prosecutor for, as you know, for years, and I'm not aware of them bringing charges, dropping them, and then bringing them back, especially after release of the evidence, ever. So I just want you to just answer that. I don't really even care what AG Nerona said. My concern with hearing this is no one on the board knew about this, to my knowledge, that this was ever going to be a topic of conversation, a strategy, or anything. We discussed that video last time. We talked about not releasing it. And now at least I'm hearing that this thing was laid out to him directly. And you're saying it's, I don't know. I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear so I can get, to me, a little clearer answer. Again, I'm not trying to whatever, but I'm just surprised. Let's put it that way.
I'll say two things. I don't want to be clear that what is happening is not being misrepresented. I will repeat one more time. In no way, shape, or form did I ever tell the Attorney General to dismiss the charges. I will be honest, I don't remember if he called me or if I called him, but we do have a working relationship that exists prior to my being in para, and especially more since we were on para. I've sat in meetings with the Attorney General prior to this to talk about other things, and so it's not surprising to me that we had a conversation about this case and that I, again, discussed what might be one alternative. In no way did I make an agreement with him and go over this board and tell him what to do. In no way did I hide this fact, Michael. I'm pretty sure you and I had. I know
we didn't. Trust me, we never had this conversation. As much as I've been talking about with you about why is this not a felony? It's a shoot foot. It's manner of means. I don't care if the guy didn't get hurt. He could have gotten hurt. And I didn't understand why this was a misdemeanor to even begin with. You can always reduce a charge, but trying to charge up is more difficult. And we talked about this. I sent you the case law over. I did all that other stuff. So saying that we had a conversation about any hypothetical about, how about we dismiss this, release the video? I'm not even for releasing that video without going past the city solicitor's office anyway. And I told you the legal ramifications of a lawsuit in that. So I can say right now, and I want to make sure this is clear, you and I never had a conversation about releasing that video or dismissing charges in any way, shape, or form. Well, so let's just make sure, because this is a public hearing, that is clear.
Sure, and I appreciate that. And I'll make 2 points in response. I know for a fact that we did have a long conversation about my conversation with the Attorney General. Whether or not I mentioned that hypothetical conversation, I'm not going to say that I remember, but you and I definitely did have.
Jose, you've never told me ever that, and trust me, given my response right now, you have never said, I asked him if we could blank. I hypothesized to him that we should blank.
That's
ever.
Fine.
Now, you did say to me, I talked to him about charges, and he told me about the misdemeanor, and I said it should be a felony. And why isn't it a felony? We had that conversation.
Yeah.
But we never talked about, I went up to him and I said, hey, what if we got rid of that to show the video?
Right.
Whether or not you two had conversations about this, it seems like it's evidence that there were some conversations with turning the video over to Prism about this. And that was never discussed with the board either.
Well, number one, Prism made a public records request, and what did we do? We handed it over to the law department and they answered it. So that's the extent of that.
No, that's not actually the extent of that, because it seems like there was an email that was sent to you in regards to that not being produced. And as you scroll down through this email thread, it seems like there were further conversations about some board members having an issue and that was going to be discussed at a following meeting.
Again, to the extent that Prism was involved in anything, the only involvement, and I hear you citing a specific email. If there's anything inconsistent with what I'm saying, I'll confront it. The only context in which Prism and the video go in the same sentence is because they made a public records request. I reserved my opinion on public records request, deferring to the law department, and nothing more has been done about that.
Actually, that's not the case. Because it seems like there was some discussion back and forth about when this request should be made, who was making it, and whether or not someone should come to the office and pick it up on a zip drive or a CD. And yeah, I'd rather not go into actually reading the emails in the open session, but I would be certainly happy to do that in an executive session. And nothing against Prism, but if Prism is going to be shown this deference, then DARE should be, Project Pink and Black should be, Black Lives Matter should be, every other direct action organization should be getting the same opportunity to be able to have that discussion with this board. It shouldn't be limited to one group.
No, sorry, this is Board Member Pivolet. So I was not aware of this email with Prism. I think I'm coming out staticky. Can everyone hear me or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I was not aware of this, and this is a little bit alarming to me to hear this. That's a little bit concerning to me regarding these two, just hearing what's these two items regarding Prism and then also the reduction of charges. Was that shared with everybody, or did I miss that email?
That was only between a few members of the board.
Hey, you weren't excluded. I don't think I got one either, so.
Mr. Vice Chair, can we just note that Ms. Ray is present and
Yes, please make the record show that Ms. Ray is now present.
so noted, Mr. Vice Chair?
The chair recognizes Mr. Rita.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'd like to now kind of turn the conversation into some of the daily happenings that are going on and the process. I, like the original 9 members of this board, applied to para and went through a process of being interviewed by many city council members prior to being elected. So we all took an oath to faithfully discharge the duties of para. However, after first bringing my concerns to the chair over a year ago, and then again recently, and then not being addressed, I can really no longer stay silent and want to address my concerns. I have, which I feel are really an impediment to the success of para. And
I'm sorry, Mr. Rita, it's very, very difficult to hear you.
I'm sorry. Okay, can you hear me? Is that better?
Slightly.
Okay, I'll just talk a lot louder. I'm sorry, it's a new system here. Okay, do you want me to repeat that, or could everybody hear the gist of what I said?
Hear you.
Got it. Okay, so I just want to go over some of these issues, and if you can just kind of wait till the end and till I go through everything to maybe address some of these. As we recently learned that there was a family which kind of was an example of complainants that are not kept informed of the ongoing status of their complaint, nor are complaints that are not relevant, such as state police or other city, denied right away. So we're getting state police reports. I mean, we got Central Falls. Those just need to be denied right away rather than bring them to the board. An initial investigation is not conducted prior to bringing the complaint to the board. Jose, you were asked to obtain a report, an initial police report to see if there was camera footage or anything before it was brought to the board for disposition. So basically, the only thing that we have to go on is one side of the story, the complaint that we get. You paid an intern $1,500. There was a lot of the board members that when this was discussed were in opposition to paying her. Yet you and our chair, Nick, decided to pay her anyways. So she received $1,500. The gang database that it's commonly referred to, lawsuit was ended, it was settled in March of 2020. You never gave us a review or provided an analysis of changes when you knew the policy was a major concern to the board. You have not provided continual information on the police union contract, except for, I think, just letting us know of 2 conversations that you've had, rather than, what are the details? We want to know what they're proposing, those kinds of things. You've used your position for political gain. Congratulations for winning that election, but you've made a lot of statements and social media that were really not showing how impartial you should be as an executive director. When you first had your interview for this position, and Deb and Mike were, I think, the members that are here that were part of that, there was a discussion that you would not hold any outside employment. Yet last year and this year, you hold a position at Bryant University. It's conducted 2 mornings a week, one morning of which is on Tuesday morning when the command staff meets, which is a meeting that really you should have a presence at. You've never completed the community outreach materials. You did an initial draft of a brochure. I gave you a lot of suggestions as to how to change it, some things that it was lacking, and then we never saw it again. Sorry. Let's see. You still haven't purchased basic office equipment that you need that's necessary to produce some of those brochures, or just to be able to send out some of these initial acknowledgement letters to people that you've received their complaint. The investigative consultant is not being adequately supervised, and we'll get to that a little bit later. He's been allowed to make public statements. He attends confidential meetings. You seem to take him to all the meetings with the police department because you feel that he's more respected than you are. He makes statements also that are not impartial. And I mean, that's the key thing for this board, is that we are impartial. You have not prepared a timeline of attempts to get information to document why complaints have not been finalized. Let's see, when we passed the bylaws, you kept providing the wrong copies, so you really need to beef up those organizational skills. You should be the one researching the databases for the information input. You were asked to develop a rubric so that we can be sure we are handling each case equitably, because sometimes I question whether we are doing that, and that's really not fair for us to be doing. You never provided the board with a requested list of trainings that the officers receive at the academy and ongoing professional development and their funding source, as we have the ability to kind of redirect some funding and possibly allocating some additional funds for training. You've not taken advantage of professional development opportunities or kept the board notified of the virtual conference that was just available at NACOL. You can take, just one course or whatever online, and that would have been great for us to know. Operation Bust Out seemed to be very passionate for you, and we discussed it at one of our meetings, and you were supposed to review the policies and the practices in reference to that, but you never reported back to the board. So there seems to be this pattern of, everything, being brought that it's really important, and then it just falls off and nothing happens. So I don't know if anybody else has anything to add, but thank you for listening.
City Clerk's office, there's a couple people in the attendees that have questions. I don't know if we're getting to those, or if Board Woman Dorita wanted Jose to respond, or I'm not sure.
And
And
I do
yes,
also
that
want to say
would
something.
be up to the vice chair if he wants me to allow anyone from the attendee side to speak. I would need that directive from him.
I would think that we would like to give the executive director an opportunity to respond.
I mean, is there a question in there? Do you want me to go one by one in that entire list? Like, what is the purpose of what you would like to see happen?
that's totally up to you.
Then I'd rather not address it at this time. I'm going to try to remember as many of those things as possible. If you want to give to the public an opportunity to speak, and I'll take some notes here and try to come up with as many responses as I can.
If I could just say something, I just received an email in the last 5 minutes from Shauna Kurland. I'm pretty sure you guys are all aware of who she is. If I could just read what the email from her says, and this is in regards to what the vice chair was just speaking about in terms of the emails that I won't elicit. But she did mention that she said, and I quote, "I don't have emails for other board members. Please share. I never once suggested that PRISM should get special treatment. Rather, that I was assuming PARA would follow the law concerning APRA, even if the police department wouldn't." I don't know if you want to make a statement to that, Vice Chair. I was unaware of the emails, but I do know that as you are also aware, I was a former member of PRISM, and I did do work with them, so I have easy contact with Shauna, and that's most likely the reason why she contacted me in order to get into contact with Para. But if you would like to make a comment towards that, Vice Chair, I do know that she also would like to speak. I think I do see her hand raised in one of the attendees. But if you have anything to say to that, Vice Chair, or if you would also, I don't know if I'm allowed to, but there is an attached email that she forwarded to me regarding what you were speaking about. I don't know if I'm allowed to read that.
I would confer with the solicitor.
But however,
Is that all
So
right?
what exactly do you, I mean, that's not like an open meeting issue. Like we're talking about Jose right now. The agenda item is that the board is speaking about and addressing the job performance of the executive director. So as much as we can stay on that topic, that's what we need to do. But inherently, I don't think that there's a problem with you guys reading emails from, private citizens into the record. I would just say that we need to kind of stay on topic and not try to get like too far afoul of speaking about the executive director's job performance, because that's the agenda item that we're on.
yes, and I understand that. And I'm talking about this in reference to the job performance because I know that it's something that other board members didn't like or felt that was bypassed by the board. And I figured that this was something that if there was no one else that wanted to speak on it, I do know that we moved from what Vice Chair was talking about to Mr. Rita and the list that she just provided for us. And I just figured that this was something that maybe could also go into it, but I wanted to bring it up to the board so that folks could discuss or decide whether or not we want to continue with that as well or not. That's all.
I don't see an issue.
Yeah, open meetings wise, I don't see an issue.
Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Would you be comfortable with me reading the forwarded email that she sent to me, Vice Chair, or would you like to bring Ms. Curlin on herself so she can speak on behalf of the issue? It really is up to you.
If you'd like to bring Ms. Curlin on, does the board have an issue with bringing Ms. Curlin on?
With your permission, sir, I will allow her to speak.
That's fine. Have Ms. Curlin on, please.
Good evening, Ms. Curland. You are now live. If you could please state your name for the record.
Good evening, Shauna Kurland, SHANNAH, KURLAND. And very quickly, because I appreciate that you're dealing with a heavy topic and have a lot to cover. I just wanted to clarify, and the emails, as Ms. D said, the emails have been, I've forwarded to those I did have email addresses for. This was simply an APRA request. It was after that last para meeting, a couple meetings ago, where many of us, including I think most of you on the board, were expressed a lot of concern about the video not being made public. As a follow-up to that, I did send an APRA request directly to para, assuming because Jose's the Director Batista, to him and to the chair. That was it. It was not in any way expecting any special treatment for PRISM. It was with the same assumption that any individual or group that requested it should get it. Follow-up emails, because we didn't get a response, were also challenging the idea that it had to go through the law department, because I don't believe that's required. And it was pretty clear at this point that the law department would be backing up the police position. There was no request for special treatment at all. We weren't, in fact, pleased at all with the response that we didn't get within the 10 business day period. But just to make that clear, that since it did come up as an issue, there wasn't any kind of behind the scenes or PRISM asking for, expecting special treatment in any way, just as a step to follow up on that discussion at the June board meeting and to try to push the application of the Public Records Act to what we believed is the correct and legal position. So thank you so much for that opportunity to jump in and clarify.
Thank you, Ms. Curlin.
If I could just respond very briefly to that. So it under APRA, you're right. It's not a requirement that under the law that it comes through the law department. However, PARA is a city entity. It is part of the city. The city's process and procedure is for the law department to review APRA requests. And in terms of the 10 days, the city responded to your, and by the city, I mean the law department, responded to the APRA request the day that it received it from Jose. So, Jose had that APRA request, and the law department was not made aware of it until the day that we responded.
I'm sorry. Can you talk about the request again? I just missed you broke up a little bit. I'm sorry.
The request was for a copy of the video.
And you didn't get it until when? I'm sorry.
I'm not sure. I don't have it in front of me, so I can't say exactly how many business days it was after the request was received. But in response to it being, the APRA request was mentioned at a board meeting. In response to it being mentioned, I checked with the APRA team in the law department. They did not know about the request. I asked Jose to send the request to me. And on the day that I received it from Jose, the law department responded.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out how all of this fits together here. Vice Chair, is there, I think you're one of the people, does this fit in any way, or is it fine? I'm not looking at an email, so I'm just wondering.
There were email exchanges earlier on that were not brought to the board's attention. And again, this is that part of that pattern of behaviors that are not expressed to the board. And there was never any intention to express that PRISM was involved in some sort of a behind the scenes thing on their own. As I said, this is the question of, if one group is being given that attention, all groups should be given that attention. There were constant conversations amongst the board about political pressure that was being applied and how people were asking for the video. And it was always a nebulous term. People are asking, there's political pressure. Who? People. Who? People. Who? People. So if we're aware of where these requests are coming from, and then there's a meeting to ask two board members about their feelings on sharing this video, why did that have to be some sort of a sidebar conversation? And in that meeting on August 18th, I even expressed the idea that this sounds like something that should be expressed to the entire board.
And I'm sorry, what was this again? Was it to release the video?
To release the video. I don't know if anyone remembers that there was a press conference that was planned to discuss this, where the contractor was supposed to give a statement. Then there was a press release that was issued in regards to this. And the question is, what was so important about making sure that this video was shown, even to the point of dropping charges to get it shown? What were we going to be able to achieve simply by getting it shown?
I remember that meeting when we had that last meeting when we had the police commissioner and the police chief there. We had some concerns about releasing the video. My concern, I believe I was trying to express that we should have waited to release the video, and I thought we would release a press release. So when I heard the thing, you know, about releasing the video to Para, I was a little bit concerned hearing that today. And that's, I thank Shauna for giving clarity of what was discussed. But, you know, it was a little bit concerning to me to hear this today. And that's some of my concerns.
Mr. Vice Chair, we do have an additional hand raised on the attendee side.
Who was the hand that's raised?
The person's name is Luis Vargas.
Does the board recognize this individual? Who is this individual?
I don't recognize the name, but
I mean, this is why we had a public meeting, so
I was going to say, I guess it is a public meeting.
They
So
have comments, so give them an opportunity to speak.
Okay. Mr. Vargas,
Yep. Hi.
please state your name for the record, sir.
Yep. It's Luis Vargas. First name Luis, last name Vargas.
You have the floor.
Thank you. Before I say anything, I'm just a member of the public. I just wanted to comment on what I'm hearing. Am I able to just give freely my comments on what I'm hearing, or am I limited to a certain topic? Or
I believe you just stay on the top. These are topics that the agenda that we're on right now, which is about the performance of the executive director. So
okay.
If your comments are geared towards that, that'd be great. If not, you can maybe hold them for another agenda item.
Sure. Yeah. So I do have a few comments on what I've heard so far. I'm a member of the public. I've been a member of nonprofit boards in the past and am currently. And I just want to say, frankly, I am dismayed by the process that I'm hearing here. I have never before heard of a performance review where there were no benchmarks for the employee mentioned, where there were no discussions on whether benchmarks were met, or whether goals were being met by the employee. What I'm hearing today, it just sounds like an airing of grievances that people just feel like getting off of their chest. They're just saying things that they don't like about the executive director and not actually tying their comments to specific performance tasks. I want to say I'm particularly dismayed by seeing someone who's on a city board suggesting that members of a board or employees of a board should not run for political office. I think that you don't sacrifice your right to participate in the political process by being an employee of the city. In fact, I know there are many employees of the city who are great representatives of our city up at the State House for us. And I just want to express my dismay as a member of the public that this would be discouraged by employees of the city. And as a member of the public, I'd also like to say, in specific to what benefit the release of the video might have. You know, I haven't seen the video. I don't know what's in it. But what I can say is transparency is the greatest disinfectant. I think sunlight is the best disinfectant is the term. And I know for a fact, if anything wrong happened in that video, the public would be better for having seen it, if for only the reason that they can hold police accountable for whatever actions were taken, whether that be through altering training procedures, whether that be through learning if there was more than one officer involved. You know, we've heard that one officer was charged, but we don't know if there was only one officer on the scene of what happened. So as a member of the public, I just want to say that I do think there's benefit to releasing the video. And I gotta say, I wish that this board was as focused on holding police accountable as you seem to be holding your executive director accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vargas. We appreciate your commentary. The board recognizes Mr. Rita.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I didn't say anything about running for office because I do know that there are a lot of our city employees who do hold office. I was referring to a job held at Bryant University at a time when he should be attending to para business at the police department for the command committee meeting. He does have a job description. Everything that I did bring up, there have been numerous emails, conversations, and discussions at board meetings. So what I brought up was nothing new to Jose or anybody else on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Rita.
If I may, now that the folks in the public have participated.
Mr. Vice Chair, there is one more hand raised.
Oh.
I don't know if you want to continue to move forward with that.
Why don't we give Mr. Batista, the executive director, an opportunity to finish his comment?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I didn't mean to cut anybody off. I didn't notice any other hands, so I'll try to be quick. I will address the complaints and the list there very openly and honestly. I heard most of it. I remember most of it. And I'll speak about it generally, and then I'll try to be as specific as possible. And Susan, I don't think any of this should come as a surprise back to you. You and I have had many conversations and enjoyed a pretty good relationship up until recently, where we spoke often and you gave me ideas often, and I tried my best to implement as many of those ideas as possible. There's some of the things that you're saying there, I absolutely agree. For example, one that stands out is Operation Bust Out and how I didn't follow up on that. Hey, I hear you all the way. And there's a number of things that I could do better. I could be more efficient and follow up on. I accept that. I've never pretended to be a perfect executive director. I'm happy to receive feedback, and I always have, and I haven't been nasty about it or anything like that. For a long time, we've been pretty fiscally conservative, and I think that's putting it delicately. One thing that I think could go a long way to addressing many of the concerns that you expressed is to finally move forward and hire an assistant. Some sort of executive assistant, which is in the budget. Even the budget now that we have, still working off of the previous fiscal year budget. There are a number of things that are have grown to become very inefficient. When I started this role about 18 months ago, the idea was that not only was I to build a system, but to kind of figure out what the needs were and figure out, you know, everything myself first, and then kind of build the staffing infrastructure. The first couple of steps and the priorities in that sense were the investigator and mediator, which are not full-time positions, but I propose that when we got our budget straightened out after COVID, they should be full-time positions because they're very important. And so I think one step we can take to address some of those inefficiencies is to hire an executive assistant. I'll give you a couple of good examples of things that are really inefficient for me to handle that take a significant part of my day. Picking up the paraphone. There's, you know, Susan's mentioned that there are some complaints that shouldn't be brought to the board. I agree with you. Unbeknownst to you, that does happen. There are many times where people call me and want to say the most incredible things about police. But if it doesn't make sense, or if it doesn't pass the bare minimum test in my mind, I don't bring it to the board. If there's anything that I brought to the board that you think doesn't deserve the board's time, I apologize, and I'd be happy to talk about that. So that filtering process is taking place. But picking up the para phone is something that takes up a lot of time. Just today, I had at least 3 phone calls. 2 of them had experienced traumatic incidents, and so it takes time to sit there and counsel people and put them on to resources that they need if para can be helpful. That'd be something that'd be helpful for an executive assistant to do. The purchasing process, which we're going to talk about in a later agenda item, is, with all due respect to everybody who's been very patient with me at City Hall, profoundly inefficient. In order for para to buy anything, including a box of paper clips, we have to put it in order. The order has to be processed. I then have to pick up the order online. It has to be sent to the chief of staff of the city council. They have to approve it. It has to be sent to the purchasing department. I have to get it back. I have to print it and submit it to the city with 2 copies of the invoice. It's remarkably time consuming. That's something that can be handled by executive assistant. So there are some things that could be managed better. Absolutely, I agree. I don't shy away from any mistakes that I made or inefficiencies in the process. Let's handle it. I hope I have your cooperation in hiring an assistant. There is at least one thing that you mentioned that I want to, address head on, not necessarily like apologize for, because I don't, but the issue about paying the intern $1,500. Yes, I hear you completely. Yes, I understand your concerns that para members expressed that they didn't want to do that. I honored that up until we passed the bylaws and had a discussion about the bylaws, and this board approved bylaws that say that I can make any expenses under $5,000. And so when I had that discretion, and we had an intern who worked for us for not only a summer, but a whole semester. And if you break down what we gave her as a stipend, it's not even an hourly rate. I didn't think that was unreasonable. If any board members are upset that I did that, listen, I apologize. I could have handled that better. Obviously, you folks are planning on amending the bylaw, so that won't happen again. But that's something that I'll say, yes, I acknowledge what you're saying. I hear your concerns. I could have handled that better. And to the extent that I offended or anybody feels disrespected by that, I apologize. But we're talking about paying a law student, somebody who's a constituent of our city, for pretty good work that they did. A couple other specific things. Let me see. Oh, my social media. Listen, there's 2 things that this board is complaining about that honestly I wish I had done more of. You guys are going to get into the expenses for the investigator and the mediator. Honestly, I don't think we've spent enough, and I will explain the exact context of our budget and why I think that. Obviously, I'm not going to do it without the board's approval. And again, if the process is muddy or folks don't feel like they're informed, hey, let's break it down. You guys want to see a monthly report? By all means. Para has not spent a penny since March 29 of this year. So there's any notion that we're just out here frivolously spending cash is far from the truth. Para has a $300,000 budget. We are trying to conduct oversight of an institution that has $90 million. Our budget represents 0.5% of what they're spending. And even sadly beyond that, and we can cancel the executive director's report, because all I had to say was, let's put some context behind our spending. In the first fiscal year that this board existed, 2018 and 2019, Para had 302,000, something like that. Let's call it 300,000 to be even. We returned 87% of that to the city. We spent something like 40 grand total in the first fiscal year. And so what are we saying to the city? That this work is not worth spending money on. In the second fiscal year, my first fiscal year as executive director that started July 1, 2019 to June 30 that just passed, we spent a total of about $140,000 out of a $340,000 budget. That is, we returned to the city over 50% of our budget. We're saying to the city, here we are with 0.5% of the budget, of the police budget, and we don't even think we should spend half of that. That's what we're saying. And if you want to be even more specific, the majority of our spending is my salary. If you take away my salary, we have about 250, and my benefits and all that stuff, the approximate cost, we have about $250,000 to spend. We spent 40,000 out of $250,000. So we can talk about the expenses. I'm happy to go into those things, but let's just put into context exactly what it is that is taking place here. With regard to my social media, I wish I would be posting more. You can scour my Facebook, my Twitter, my everything, and you will see maybe 2 specific instances that I'm aware of that allude to anything that's even tangentially related to this work. And honestly, I'm ashamed of myself. I wish I would be doing more on social media. Not necessarily, doing what the FOP is doing, which is tweeting and celebrating every single time there's a new crime in the city, but maybe telling folks about what we're doing. maybe advocating that we have some meeting, maybe engaging the public, which is what we're supposed to do. I don't even do that because I'm so nervous, and you all are proving my point tonight, that anything that I do is going to be scrutinized, misinterpreted, mismanipulated against me because for a reason that is unclear. So I'm not ashamed of what I put on social media. I'm not ashamed of working at Bryant. That meeting you're talking about on Tuesdays, I stopped going to before working at Bryant, and I will not attend. And I'm happy to talk about that privately. And I'll say with all due respect, I work for this board, but I don't work for any one board member in particular. And so to Mr. Rita's points, there are many suggestions that she's made that I've implemented. The reason why we meet on the third Wednesday of every month is because Susan suggested it, and I think it was a great idea. There was a time, and listen, I have nothing to be embarrassed about. There was a time that I wanted to talk about marijuana car stops at a board meeting. And Susan put the brakes on it because I hadn't looked at the police reports first. Excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up. I looked at the police reports, and we could still certainly have a conversation about that topic, but her point was valid. And so I'm not sitting here completely disregarding everything that you're saying. I think that I implement a fair amount of the things you want, but I want to be clear. I don't work for you as an individual. And to the extent that there are things that you recommend that go counter to the work of this board, I respectfully reserve my right to disagree with you. If this board wants to vote and have certain things done, by all means. I don't think there's any record ever of me, being disrespectful to the board or not doing what the board wants. If anything, I'm standing before you today, forget the politics, forget the board, forget this, as a human being, and saying to you that I am not doing enough as executive director. And the reason for that is out of the deference that I'm giving this board and trying as best as I can to fill my role, to be impartial, to provide legal advice. If you want to talk about partiality, I'm not going to single out anybody on this board, including yourself, but there have been litany of examples of board members doing things that are not partial. So there's concern about me saying things that may potentially, possibly in some way be misconstrued to be anti-police, but where's the concern about all the things that happen that are blatantly pro-police? And so I'm happy to have a conversation. It's you said a moment ago that there's nothing that you said that's new. When there are a couple of things that you mentioned now that you and I have never spoken about before. There's also something you said that I haven't bought basic equipment. Let's be clear. You asked me specifically one day to make some copies of a document. And what I responded to you was, my car is not working, is getting serviced at this time. Therefore, I cannot go to the office and get them for you. How you misinterpreted that to mean that we don't have the equipment yet, I don't know. It sounds like a mistake. We're humans, we make mistakes, but let's treat each other the same, because I think there's a double standard that's being applied. And again, so the general idea is, are there things I could do better? Yes, absolutely. Let's talk about them. Am I bound to do every single thing that every single board member wants? No, especially when I don't think it's counter to, when I think it's counter to the mission of this board. And I think that we could do a lot better job doing this more efficiently, more honestly, if we had a conversation about it. I've made multiple phone calls to multiple board members, and some of those have been unreturned. There's no willingness to have a conversation with me about this stuff unless it's here at a board meeting. And so, I'm sure it felt good to read that list of concerns, but if you are really concerned with addressing those things, then let's do the things that more directly address those things, because I'm more than happy to.
Mr. Rita, you're recognized to respond.
Thank you. Okay, Jose, I have never, ever said or suggested anything to you that would be contrary to the mission of this board. I have had to several times, you have sent me documents to review for you. I've had to change language because you had a very, very aggressive tone, correct? And other board members have done the same. They've reviewed your information. Everything that I brought up, it was nothing new, because other board members, and you can all attest to this or whatever, have heard these same things. I have sent you emails. If you want to go over all the comments of the things that you've said, I mean, I have, screenshots from different things that, whether they were interviews or articles. I mean, I don't want to get into, every single piece of paper, but it wasn't just two.
Ms. Ray,
mean, I don't want to get tit for tat here.
Ms. Ray, do you have a comment? The board recognizes Ms. Ray.
Yes, thank you very much. First and foremost, let me be very clear. This board from the beginning knew, each and every member knew that we were going to be a board that was going to be very clear with the public as well as the board. What I have a problem with hearing today is it feels like we're attacking, or Jose, you feel like you're being attacked. Let me be very clear as far as I'm concerned. I'm not attacking you. I'm questioning some of your methods on what I heard today. For example, sir, you are our executive director. When somebody comes to you in the middle of the week and our meeting is 3 weeks later, please let us know exactly what is happening. Because of that lack of communication is where the problem is happening. Now, you have come to me, sir, as well as other members, and have gotten our opinions because we are not allowed to meet as a whole against the rules, if I'm not mistaken. So please correct me if I'm wrong. Now, I don't think I'm wrong, but when you meet with any board members, including the chair, and it's something that is important for each and every board member to know, at the next available meeting time, that subject should always come up. That is something that I feel is lacking or has lacked it. Because what I've heard today, as far as receiving emails from this one and this one's talking to this one, that's all well and fine. Nobody's attacking you. We're just attacking the fact that we're not receiving the correct communication at all times. And that's when it becomes nitpicking. We are all here as one. Now, I say this because one of the things that was bothering me, and I'm gonna speak on it, I was wondering about the process with our two new board members. Did they go through the same process that we did, the original board member? Now, I didn't ask you, Jose. Wait, I'm sorry, I apologize. I asked you and you said yes. I've asked another person and they wasn't quite sure, but I just let it go. I don't want to assume anything from anybody. We all took an oath. We all stood there and said what we wanted, why we was here on this board, to work with the public for transparency. So when Mr. Lewis stated what he said and feeling as though we're attacking you, no, sir, we're not attacking Mr. Jose. What we're doing is making it clear that each and every board member knows what's going on and not sit in the dark. That's all I'm saying. Have a blessed day.
And I'll just say quickly in response to that, if to the extent that there was anything that I didn't share with the board, like this back and forth with Prism, I didn't mean to hide anything. I'll do a better job communicating that. Just for the 2 cents of the record, what I thought was they made a request, and there's no reason why I gave them any partial treatment. They were the group that made a request. If another group had made a request, I would have done the same thing. And ultimately, what I saw the conclusion of that was they made a request, the city denied it. That's what happened. And so I didn't mean to lie, deny, anything else. If I can do a better job providing more information, hey, I'm happy to do it. We got nothing to hide.
If I can be recognized,
Mr.
again,
Fontaine, you're recognized.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I kind of wanted to add to what Miss Ray had said. I mean, to me, this is not simply an attack. Like I said, the thing that concerns me more that I've heard today clearly has to do with that whole conversation about the charges. Something that, you know, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is this. We're talking about communication, and you were saying to Mr. Rita about things that if someone asked me about doing things that go against the board, and Miss Ray was talking about communication with the board. I mean, a lot of this stuff, like I said before, I haven't heard about. Not from you guys. Some of this is coming out tonight. Some of this I heard from somebody else. But, you know, the whole thing about discretion, the whole thing about those things about everything that the executive director does is reviewable by the board. The executive director assists the board. The executive director is not the board. So all these other things that happen, the discretion is given so you can act in between. But an executive director clearly is going to be and again, the fiduciary act in the best interest of the board. And, clearly I was on the hiring committee, so that's what it was expected. I'm saying I share those same sentiments that, I mean, like I said before, you said that some people might ask you to do something. I still can't get over the charge thing. I mean, I'm assuming nobody asked you to do that.
What?
On the board. I mean, since you're saying some people did, have been asking you to do things on the board that are against the interest of the board. I'm assuming no one asked you to do that on the board. So I guess my point is, I'm sorry, I'm kind of spinning my wheels a little bit, but I guess my point is, these acts, going in there and talking to him, again, that's my biggest issue here is no one has ever made aware of that, ever. And that to me is so concerning when it directly impacts charges. I mean, we're trying to hold these officers, like whoever, I forgot his name, Luis, whatever his last name is, a public person made that statement.
Mr. Vargas.
Vargas. Yeah, I mean, you talk about we should be more concerned with holding police officers accountable. That's what I'm trying to do. I mean, I think all officers should be. I'm an MP. Officers should clearly be held accountable for what they do. I get the whole tough job thing, but that's no excuse. So, again, I think just at the least we should have been told this. To be aware that was even out there. I mean, and again, without getting into the conversation, if this was something that was going to be held over your head, I mean, you clearly weren't speaking for the board, I would likely guess here, because I've never heard of it. And that's why I asked you, that someone asked you to make that request. But that stuff needs to be disclosed. I mean, that could be used against you. That's something that someone could, I don't know, I'm not saying it's blackmail, but if you're the implication you made to me was like it was being used or a threat or something of that nature that could affect things down the road. And we don't even know about that. So if you're not going to do something or act in a certain way or press a certain thing because someone has something over you, that's important. That's why I guess what my point is, everything needs to be disclosed to the board in between. You clearly have the discretion to do the day-to-day. You can't be calling everyone when you want to get a stapler. But, like Ms. Ray was saying, that communication is key, regardless. So I was just adding on to that. Again, that's just my biggest concern here this evening.
Ms. Swearingen, you have a comment?
Hi, yes. So minus Mike Fontaine's very specific instance of concern, I think that ultimately what we need here is a governance and operations structure to ensure those benchmarks that Mr. Vargas was speaking about, what we can talk about what needs to happen. Because theoretically speaking, if we took Jose out of this situation, the problems are still going to exist, regardless who the executive director is going to be. We're still not going to have that governance. We're still not going to have a cadence for information. And so we need to create that as a board. And I think that there's opportunities for solutions here to create these, again, solutions for the problems that we have. And yes, there are instances like Mike Fontaine's specific one where I'm not a lawyer. I can't speak to that. I have no idea. But the other issues that Susan was speaking about, there are instances where, yes, we make requests to Jose and sometimes they happen and sometimes they happen immediately and we get the answer and sometimes he doesn't. And that's his discretion as to if he should implement that suggestion or not. But again, as Ms. Ray said, there are some concerns about communication, whether that's the fiscal considerations or the meetings that they're having one-off and how that worked and things. And maybe it's creating a memo system. And so you report at the first of every month, this is how much money we spent, this is why we spent it, these are the memos of the meetings that I went to with these different people, and this is how it works. But we need to find solutions as opposed to just sitting here and not attacking, whatever, because we're not getting anywhere. We're just sitting here arguing about this, and it's not going to be helpful for the work that we're trying to do, which is hold the police accountable in the city of Providence.
Thank you, Ms. Swearingen. Mr. Rita?
I'll just make 1 second because I know that Lisa Scorpio has been waiting patiently to say something. We also have an obligation to the people who file complaints, and we're not meeting that obligation if we're ignoring them. So when they file a complaint, they need to be getting some kind of communication as to the entire process, as to whether it's, it's going to be heard, it's not going to be heard. I'm sorry, but we can't get, we can't get to it. I mean, that's just, that's basics.
That's basic operations, and that's exactly what I'm talking about.
If we hire somebody who is an attorney and who supposedly has some previous experience, that's basic stuff, just like you get out of bed and you go brush your teeth in the morning. I'm sorry.
So we can create a work plan as an executive board. We can create a work plan of those benchmarks that Mr. Vargas was speaking about and the things that we're looking for and when we need them by, and then create a governance structure to ensure that when these things aren't happening, we can find benchmarks to make them happen or suggest that there's changes in leadership. But for right now, we haven't been given the opportunity to be successful. And I totally agree that certain things should just come as second nature. But the fact of the matter is that while para was a system before, it then went dormant, and then it was created again under a new auspice of different bylaws and rubrics and different climate, really. And there's a lot of other moving parts here. And so ultimately we need to find what we can do to make this system successful. Because again, you take Jose out of it, the problems are still going to exist.
But there's basic accountability. And if you are running an organization, whether it's an organization that has a budget of 100,000 or, $10 million, there's certain things as an executive director that just gets done. And that just gets done stuff just doesn't get done.
Okay, so we can find that list. We'll put it together. We'll make it happen. But I want to find a solution for this. And I'm not asking Jose to put together the 5 things that we think we need to be done. Susan, you've obviously created a list. They seem to fall into a number of brackets. And I would love to put this information into a bucket, and we can do offset emails with individuals and not mess up open meetings laws and things like that. Or we can create some sort of day-long board retreat, and we can talk about these things to create a system. So when Jose's gone and somebody else is in, the system is going to be successful.
Well, there's certainly a need for an adjustment in the procedures on how we can meet and how we can disseminate information to one another. That's been a huge barrier to all this work getting done from the onset. But I do take issue with the idea that, Mr. Batista, that you're ganged up on by members of this board, or that you're not being given an opportunity. There are plenty of opportunities. I know that I've had personal conversations with you and you've ignored things that I've presented to you. I know that there was a representation to the city that was 9 or 10 points that I had submitted. You had requested for individuals to submit things to you, and you went off on a thing about having the contractor, Mr. Montero, being the center of these things. Either way, I just take issue with the idea that somehow you're not getting proper feedback from members of the board, and that somehow the board isn't engaged with you and trying to get this work done, that you're a lone soldier walking around and everyone around you is just out to get you.
I mean, I appreciate that. I don't think everybody's out to get me. I didn't mean to suggest that, whatever it is that I said to suggest that. Again, I'm happy. I'm the one who said, let's have this conversation and let's have it in public. I'm not ashamed of it. I do want to make an honest point. And again, I'm just speaking as a person. I'm somebody who was hired for this job for a reason, and it may not be because of my obedience to people, but because of my life experience. And Susan, I'm going to say this as a human being. I see the anger in you right now. I see that. And I appreciate the point that you're making about the letter that I did or did not send. And it's basic. I should do it. And I will do it. And I apologize that I haven't done it. And I empathize honestly with you, the anger that you feel. I don't want to create that in anybody. You know what makes me angry? When police hit people, and when they pull women by the hair, and when they pin men of color to the ground using their neck. I don't get angry about letters and correspondence and business etiquette. I get angry about the fact that people's lives are on the line, and that's my priority. So to the extent that I haven't satisfied your list, I'll do the best that I can. But to the extent that you want to prioritize things that, again, there's a litany of things that we're working on, that we've seen, that we've witnessed, and we're talking about a letter. We're getting mad about a letter. I'll write the letter. I'll do it tomorrow. And Machista, you said that there are things that you told me to do that I ignored. Listen, I've ignored anybody. If I have, have things fallen off my to-do list and been disorganized or whatever you want to call it, I accept that. I own that. I'm not a perfect person. Let's make a list and let's work on it together.
I have probably, more than anybody else on this board, had conversations with you and have engaged you in many conversations and have tried very hard to work alongside you and to engage in this accountability of police. So if there's ever a question of any disposition that I have towards you, it's a frustration and wanting to get this work done. I am doggedly engaged in making sure that there is accountability, and no one on this board or anywhere else can question my dedication to this work. Okay? Sometimes I've been told that I've been too aggressive, but I am engaged in getting this work done. And if I see you wrong, or if I see that you're doing something that I don't agree with, I am definitely going to check you.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with all of that.
So I think we should give Ms. Scorpio an opportunity to say her piece, and then we can move along with this.
Ms. Scorpio, you have the floor. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, Lisa Scorpio.
Thank you.
I am so disappointed by what's going on as a member of the public right now. And for anyone on this board to say you're not attacking Jose as a member of the public, yes, you are. He has no performance review. He has no secretary. I don't know any executive directors that don't have a secretary. He has given all the money back, too much money back, and you're crying about $1,500. Susan, you did say he used this position to run for office. And as Mr. Vargas, and it blows my mind, is everybody on this board Providence residents? Because it blows my mind that none of you know who Louis Vargas is. So you're telling me that because he ran for office, there's a problem? You should be happy he won for office, because maybe he can get more done because he's a politician. No performance review, and you're all up on here complaining about every little thing. What have you done to help him do his job? As a member of the public, if we look in other cities, in other states, this is how it begins. You guys are going to break para down. There is going to be no para. All this infighting is not doing good for the residents of Providence. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Scorpio. I would just say that as the executive director of para, Mr. Batista does have the discretion to hire individuals. So if there's a question about why he doesn't have an executive secretary, I would believe that Mr. Batista, in the bylaws, it stipulates that he has the authority to hire a full-time employee as long as they pass muster with the entirety of the board. And we have 2 contractors on payroll right now that were brought on by the executive director. So thank you for your comment. What is the next agenda item?
We were on number 5. What agenda item would you like to move to next?
We going in ascending or descending order?
You want to move to item number 6?
Sure.
If I may ask a question.
Absolutely.
Before we conclude this productive conversation, in my opinion, what are we going to do to make sure that these issues are followed up on? Is there going to be any sort of follow-up conversation, or was this just a vent session? Now we're all done with that.
Mr. Rita?
Mr. Chair, we've skipped items number 3 and 4.
I'm not looking at the agenda, so let me see. Hold on. I know I'm making a.
Wait, can I just jump in? I think you guys need to decide what you're doing with the current agenda item. Are you moving on? Is there some suggestion of motion of some sort? Like you guys are kind of just moving on without me addressing it.
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, I think in terms of this stuff, I don't know, just because I don't want this particular meeting or issue to go longer than necessary. I would just say that people can chew on it. They can talk to whomever. I know there's been conversation about putting a list together. I just kind of feel that people might want the opportunity to chew on the information, figure out what they want to do, then come back. And with whatever suggestions or anything else like that, I think that's what people were just asking. If I'm incorrect, then excuse me, but it's just so quiet right now. I just figure give people a chance to think of whatever they're going to and come up with whatever solutions they want to, then we bring that back later, because I don't want to. I think kind of spending the extra or however long it's going to be to do it right now might not be not worth it, but you know what I'm saying, it'll be too long of a meeting.
Right. Did you have something to say, Mr. Rita?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the next two items, I can be kind of brief in my input, but I really think that they're something that should be kind of brought to the attention of the public.
All right, so what are our plans on settling this issue? Because there certainly needs to be something in place that's definitive, that there are goals that will be met and a time frame for them to be met in. So I think that that's something that needs to be put on for, yes, Jillian.
If I could just make a suggestion. So Ms. Swearingen had made some suggestions about putting some sort of plan together in writing, benchmarks, procedures, what have you. Those would all be part of your bylaws, which you have an agenda item on today to talk about amending some of those bylaws. So this is just a suggestion, would be that you guys could come up with some ideas of things that you would like to see added to the bylaws. And perhaps at the next meeting, there could be an agenda item to discuss those ideas, and you can kind of start brainstorming how to implement them into a larger amendment of your bylaws.
Do we have a motion to put that plan into action?
Well, so you don't necessarily need to have a motion. You guys can just agree that you'll all sort of brainstorm and bring ideas back for the next meeting. And at that next meeting, an agenda item can be that you're going to discuss this larger issue in terms of amending the bylaws.
And how do we
brainstorm? So you don't necessarily, you don't need a motion or anything right now.
But how do we brainstorm and get together to put these kinds of things together in the space of the open meetings laws?
You would do it at the meeting. So you would all, between now and the next meeting, brainstorm on your own. You could talk to a board member perhaps, but it can't be more than a quorum, and you have to be aware of not mixing groups to have a rolling quorum. But you all individually could just, as Mike Fontaine just mentioned, think about all the information before you really put something in action. You all can brainstorm on your own, and at the next meeting, the agenda item can read along the lines of discussing potential amendments to your bylaws, and you could have a productive conversation at that point about specific, goals or benchmarks that you've all, kind of thought about, and have a discussion. But that discussion would have to happen at a meeting.
Ms. Swearingen?
I was just going to suggest that if anybody has ideas, I would happily be responsible for putting together that in preparation for next week or next month's meeting.
Very good.
Great. So if she wants to do that, you guys can make a motion that Ms. Swearingen will gather information from the other board members about ideas. She'll put them together. Just make sure that you are all only sending your ideas to Ms. Swearingen, not to anybody, not to the whole board.
Very well.
So somebody just needs to make a motion to compile information and send it to Ms. Swearingen to discuss at the next meeting. That's the motion.
Is there a motion to compile information and send it to Ms. Swearingen for the next meeting?
I make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Discussion?
Who seconded?
I did, Ms. Ray.
Mr.
Mike
Fontaine.
Fontaine.
Discussion? The motion passes.
Now you just need to decide what agenda item you're going to move on to and have the clerk read it into the record, and you can start that item.
Was it item number 4 or number 3? Item number 3. So we'll move on to agenda item number 3.
Review and discussion relative to invoices paid to Sheila Hubbard. The item has been read.
I'm sorry, did someone say something? I had a difficult time hearing them.
I had something.
It was review and discussion relative to invoices paid to Sheila Hubbard. Item
Thank
number
you.
3.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Ms. Filave?
Yes.
Oh, it looked like,
I didn't say anything.
okay. Mr. Rita?
Thank you. Well, I know, Jose, that the bylaws allow you for discretion for purchases up to $5,000. As member of the board, we are all fiduciary custodians of what's entrusted to us to conduct business through the budget.
I'm sorry, if I can interrupt, is it me? I'm having a difficult time
Sorry,
hearing.
I think it's me. It's a me thing here. Okay.
Not you, Michael.
Susan,
is it breaking?
I was just going to say, you should probably just try to talk a little louder and a little slower.
Okay. All right, I'll just start again. So I know that we, in the bylaws, allow for the discretion for Jose for purchases up to $5,000 as executive director. But as members of this board, we are all fiduciary custodians of any funds that are entrusted to us to conduct the business of Para, as outlined by the ordinance. But since we have not completed a mediation to date, there are several transactions on Ms. Hubbard's billing statement, of which we paid her a total of $13,856.50. We are paying her $225 an hour, which I really don't know if that's the standard. But just a couple of questions that I wanted to ask. Was that contract that was used approved by the solicitor's office? Is that a standard contract?
I don't, is that question to me or to the solicitor?
No, to you, Jose. Was that a contract that was
No,
up with, or is that a city contract that is formed?
no, I don't think the city had anything to do with it. I think it was a contract that was, like the original that we worked off was provided to me by each of the two people. A lot of things that I have to say about these both items are applicable to both people, so I'll just talk about them as one. But each person submitted to me one contract they use, and we went back and forth on some of the terms. For example, the reason why Ms. Hubbard's hourly rate, we negotiated that at $225 was because we, at least when we negotiated with her, we did not want to pay for incidentals. She's out of Boston, right? So we didn't want to pay for mileage. We didn't want to pay for the cost. And so the trade-off was, I think her original rate might have been a little bit lower than that, but we raised it a little bit just in exchange for not having to pay those variable costs, right? So they were given to us, the original was given to us by each of the professionals, and we tweaked some of the terms and ultimately came up with the agreement.
Okay, well, I'll address Ms. Hubbard first because Mr. Montero's is a separate agenda item unless, well, I'll just do that one after. But there was a lot of things on her billing that I really didn't understand. While there was a lot of charges for prep and meeting and follow-ups, some of them seem to be very exorbitant. So like, $2,081 to meet with the union, for a prep meeting and follow-up. Let's see, there was one of the bills had a no detail. It was just, like 12.64 hours of mediation for a bill of $2,844. You requested a payment of $10,000 for the period of 3/1 to 3/31, with an invoice that you provided to the city for $10,000, but yet the invoices that you had provided to us when I had asked for them, only show for the period that it was $3,318.75. So it was like appeared that she was being like prepaid. There was another charge that says online mediations exploration. I don't understand what that is. References to training. I don't know who she trained.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Could you just speak into your microphone or something? That your words are just kind of blending together. I can't.
Okay.
I'm starting to lose you.
Sorry.
Susan, do you think you could dial in and connect with your phone audio rather than your computer audio?
It was fine earlier, but I
Okay,
can't hear you.
let me move it over a little bit and maybe that will make, is that making a difference? Is that better?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay, all right, we'll just do that then. Okay, so there was online mediations exploration. I don't know what that is. Edit and review biannual report. Why would she do that? I know you had run it by a couple of us for review, so why would you have somebody, do that at $225? She viewed a Zoom meeting. She was not, a guest at that meeting. I mean, that was $787. $675 to review board meeting and articles. There was just several things. The board had only voted to allocate $5,000 to each mediation and to investigation back in, last August. But yet you went to the Board of Contract and Supply to ask for $50,000 for each of those, and the board had not approved it. So as trustees of some funds, and I know you returned money, but that really doesn't make a difference. So if you can maybe refer
So
to those things.
I'll address those things in reverse order, or at least the last thing that you said. And I want to talk about the Board of Contract and Supply. First and foremost, I was very candid with this board and what I've said today, and whatever it is that I've done, I accept all of it, right? I'm not shying away from anything that I've done. With this letter that I sent to the Board of Contract and Supply, I'm being completely honest. When I would bet my life that conversation took place before the board, I remember specifically sitting in 807 Broad Street, making the motion to write those letters to the Board of Contract and Supply. I have looked at all the minutes and I've listened to most of the meetings, and admittedly, I haven't found where the vote is. I could be very mistaken, but what I want to say very clearly is I did not submit those letters to the board with the intent of going behind the board. As far as I remember, I'm almost certain we had that conversation. If it did not happen, I sincerely apologize. It's one thing to write a check for $1,500 for an intern. It's another thing to ask for $50,000. So let's be clear on where I stand about that. Again, let's put this into context, right? On the one hand, no, we haven't completed any mediations. On the other hand, it's been a very frustrating process. I value the work of Sheila immensely because one of my goals, as I was clear about, is that I wanted to professionalize the services that we do. And that's why the reason why we hired Sheila was because she was recommended by NACOL. I'm sorry, that's not the reason why we hired her. That's the reason we came into touch with her. She's not a friend of mine or anybody that I knew before, but I called the folks at NACOL, which is something that this board, as far as I know, this board likes NACOL and hearing the national kind of trends on this. And I asked them, I'm like, hey, we're looking to do mediations. We want to get somebody that's independent. My thinking is maybe we should get somebody from outside Rhode Island, just because Rhode Island is what it is. And everybody knows everybody. And there's only 2 degrees of separation between anybody and a police officer or anybody and a community activist. So it was very important for me to find somebody who was competent, who was professional. And with both Eugene and Sheila, I honestly think we found grand slam picks, people who have decades of experience, diverse experience, impartial people, because we all know that the minute that I would have brought in somebody who's even remotely partial, I'd be crucified for it. So I think that both of them are grand slam picks, and it's a travesty that we have not been able to get deeper into the work, in part because of the hoops that the police department is making us jump through, and also in part because of the funding. One of the reasons why, again, so $13,000, if you break that up, those expenses took place over the course of 6 months. It's something like $1,500 a month. something like a few hours a month. So it's not that unreasonable when you break it down. And a lot of that work, again, I wish it was done on mediations, but we were doing a lot of work to prepare for mediation. She had to meet, again, at the suggestion of the police, with the commissioner and the chief, with the police union, with the community. All these meetings take time. People don't just do this for free. We negotiated with her not to charge us for travel time, right? We wanted to pick somebody from Boston, but we shouldn't be paying somebody for driving on the highway. And so that's something that she was very reasonable with us in negotiating. And so with regard to those expenses, yes, there was a lot of preparation. Yes, I rely on her advice for when I'm going into those meetings, and she's the one that has experience with mediating. On the one hand, sometimes I get criticized because I apparently make conclusions, but on the other hand, I'm being criticized for using Eugene, which he's the one who's supposed to make the conclusion, right? So a lot of what I've done is try to give them the work that is relevant to them, that we hire them to do, and that they have the credibility to weigh on, right? We don't want me to be weighing in on things prematurely, so let's give the work to them. So that's why we've given the work to them. I can speak about the Board of Contract and Supply, and again, this is one of those things where I feel like I've been misinterpreted on. Yes, we have a limit of $5,000. However, we have money in the budget. Surprisingly, we have to ask for permission to spend our own money, but the way that it works is you can't give any one vendor more than $5,000 without asking for permission. So we asked for permission. When I spoke to the folks in the purchasing department, and I'm pretty sure I shared this information, or at least some extent of it, the rationale that was used to go to the Board of Contract and Supply and ask them to allocate more money to this is, listen, we're a new organization. We have a small budget. We don't have a line item for these people, right? We can't hire a full-time person because we don't have a line item. So the only way you can spend more money on them is to go to Board of Contract and Supply and ask for more money. By the way, that would be true in this fiscal year as well. We did it in the last fiscal year. At some point this fiscal year, unless the budget changes, we may have to do it again, right? So that's how that process works. And you've asked me, well, how can we do this? It's simple. We go to the Board of Contract and Supply and explain, listen, we've already spent $5,000. We're still kind of building this infrastructure. We don't know how much we're going to spend. Let us spend another 25, 30, 40,000 of the money while we figure out what we're going to do with a full-time person. And the last thing I'll say about this, the specific timing of the bulk of those expenses were in about February, March, right before coronavirus. That's because, and sadly for us, right when coronavirus struck, we were just getting to the point where we were ready to start investigating these cases. We had the meeting with the chief and commissioner. We introduced both Eugene and Sheila to them. We had the meeting with the FOP. We introduced both Sheila and Eugene to them. We talked about expectations. We talked about transparency. We talked about the work. We laughed at all their bad jokes. Like, we tried to build that sort of rapport that we needed to do investigations. We jumped all the hoops to make everybody feel comfortable. That stuff took time. That stuff takes money. There have been suggestions about using other organizations and such. I mean, fine. I know one of the organizations, as I understood it, had ties to people who were formerly police officers. Again, we have to safeguard for the independence of this work. And you'll note that I didn't hire anybody who has a background in being a community activist to do this work. I hired people who, in Sheila's case, has Ivy League degrees, decades of experience, federal government, local government, civil. I mean, you couldn't make a better resume if you tried to draw it up. And so it's very valuable to professionalize those services. Those two people have gone above and beyond. The purchasing requirement, and again, with all due respect to all the people who've been very helpful to me, but is remarkably inefficient. Poor Sheila and Eugene have gone prior to those payments of $10,000. The reason why those payments were so big is because there was a stretch before that where both of those folks went 6-7 weeks without being paid. Why? Because the process takes long. That I was telling you before. We have to file the request, and they have to turn it to the chief of staff, and he has to prove it. 6 people have to touch the thing before we can send out a check, right? For checks and balances, that's what it is, but it takes a long time. At one point with Sheila, they sent her check after waiting for a good month. They sent her check to the Providence Journal. And so we had to come and do a stop order on the check. By that point, she had accumulated like $2,000 worth of work that just simply wasn't paid. And so when we were paying her, I thought to myself, okay, let's pay you once, and then we'll work down from there. And there's never been, not the least indication of them charging us for stuff frivolously, charging extra. If anything, those people put in hours that you guys don't see in terms of work and preparation and feedback and thinking. This stuff is really high stakes. It's not easy. And Sheila, again, she charges an average of $1,500 every month. That's
I'm not questioning her qualifications. I'm sure she's very good at what she does, but the charges that are being made seem to be out of the parameters of what her contract is, and that is to do mediation services, not to train somebody. Was PRISM the only group that she met with, or were there other community organizations? Because according to her billing detail, PRISM and the union were the only organizations that she met with.
Yeah, and those, yes, the answer is yes. It was only those two, in addition to the chief and the commissioner. I mean, why PRISM? I don't mean to show any favoritism or anything. If you want me to set up meetings with her with a bunch of different orgs, I'd be happy to do it. But there's no secret in the fact that PRISM is present at every meeting. They were responsible for drafting the CSA, and it's valuable. The same way that we met with the stakeholders that are the union that have an interest in this work. To meet with the community group that has most to do with this work. And so to the point about parameters, okay, I hear you. You'll notice that there's been a significant decrease, if any, charges on her behalf since we haven't been doing mediations. A lot of that work was prepped, but there's nothing going on now. The last check we gave her again was in March. The last billing was in June. And so to the extent of that, of course, we can make sure that we're only paying for services that are relevant.
Okay, that's all I have on that one.
Just can I just jump in real quick? I just have a quick question regarding this. Did we ever? And her resume sounds great and all that other stuff. I'm just saying, did we ever bid this out or anything? Or and I know NACOL, that's a great stamp of approval, but I also just when I heard $225 an hour, because I mean we have mediators for some of the high end. I mean, again, I get the experience portion. I'm just saying, we have other mediators that I've dealt with who handle high-end cases, at least legal, that don't charge $225 an hour. I mean, that might be a Boston set fee versus a Providence, just by scale. Did we ever look into, and maybe she would have won out. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, did we ever look at anyone else? Or anyone who is local, or anyone who, I mean, I get the independent thing, but that's a big price tag on that per hour, and it might be worth it, but I'm just wondering.
At the beginning, there was certainly 2 or 3 folks that I considered. I think there was a total of 3. Sheila was one of them. She was far and away better than everybody else, and so I haven't looked into anybody since, just because she hasn't given me a reason to.
Okay.
I just have. Oh, I'm off mute.
Well,
I have a question.
Mr. Cohen?
Just a question. The 2 questions really. What training did we pay for? A, and B, what online mediation research did we pay for? Because to me, online, not one of us here got any training on how to do a Zoom meeting. Yet here we are doing it. It would seem to me that a Zoom type of mediation, if it was going to take place, given what's going on in the world today, wouldn't need research on how to do mediation on a Zoom type platform.
I'm not sure about the training part. I have to look into that. But the mediation part is easy to answer. I think we had various conversations. Again, we were trying to give the police. It was the police who asked us, right? Like, how do we do this? And not just how do we do it from a technological standpoint. How do we do it from a legal standpoint? As I'm sure you know, with mediations, what happens is the mediator has to talk to one person privately, and then goes to speak to the other party privately, and then at some point has to kind of come between the two. And so it's not as simple as putting everybody on a Zoom meeting like here, but you actually have to think about it. And again, the legal ramifications, as you all know, and I've told you before, part of the reason why we haven't done any mediations is because the response from the police department has been, okay, yeah, we'll send our guys to the mediation, but who knows if they're going to talk to you? And my response has been, no, we're not going to do that. If you have concerns about whether these folks are going to speak, or if you want to exaggerate and manipulate the law enforcement officers' rights, that they won't speak anything, we're not going to participate in that process. So, and that's the same with investigation, right? They've been trying to sell us some half version of what it is that we're entitled to do by law, and our response has been, no, we're not going to do that. The only leverage we have is that, right? We're a much smaller entity with much smaller resources, so we have decided that we're not going to go along with this whatever scraps it is that they decide to give us. We're going to fight and show research and show stats and data and why we should be in law and why we should do independent investigations and mediations. And that's been a lot of, I think Eugene and Sheila have been dedicated to helping me present and do. And obviously, coronavirus really got in the middle of it. Sadly, literally that last Friday, right before the world shut down, we were sitting at the West Side Diner with members of the FOP and Eugene and Sheila, and having a great conversation, right? And we felt literally the next step was to start the investigations, and coronavirus shut the world down. So unfortunately, some of that has gotten in the way, but I think that's what I have to say to answer that.
So I think that we can move on to the next item. I believe it's number 4 to discuss Eugene.
Item number 4, review and discussion relative to invoices paid to Eugene Montero.
Mr. Rita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've paid Mr. Montero a total of $21,000 to date. You were asked on August 27th to provide documentation for those payments. There were 4 separate payments. And you provided the documentation for Ms. Hubbard. And I realize that this agenda item is only to review and discuss the invoices, not the performance of Mr. Montero or anything. So I just want to bring it to that. So for total transparency, we need to explain why payments were made and why we haven't completed any investigations to date. You said that you were happy to provide documentation, but all we have is 4 items that he was paid $5,000, $3,000, $3,000, and $10,000, but no detail.
That's not true. I gave the entire board on September 1st a document that has however many 30, 40, 50 line items detailing exactly how he spent 215 hours total. So
I don't have that. I didn't receive that. I received Ms. Hubbard's.
I saw it this morning. I will forward it to the board again because I don't. Let me pause right there and not say what I was about to say. So he has spent a total of 215 hours working for the board since October to now. He has done more work than Sheila. Obviously, the investigations are more numerous. We've had more meetings. Obviously, there have been these specific incidents where we've gone to the police department this summer to review particular pieces of evidence. And so he spent more time. Again, we may respectfully disagree here. I wish we would have spent 6 times as much money on Eugene because that's what the substance of this work is, to do the investigations. The reason why we haven't completed the investigations, I hope you share your concern with the police department because it's their fault. From the first moment I walked into that office, I was told there will be no independent investigations. And I spent the first 3 or 4 months of my tenure just trying to get beyond that. So let's start there. We finally got to the point, again, in mid-March, we were at the point where we thought we were going to start this. Coronavirus threw a wrench into it. In July, I prepared a package of the first 12 cases to submit for investigation, and that work started. At the moment, I asked Eugene to pause just because it's unclear what this board wants to do, apparently, whether you all want to continue funding investigations at all. And so I wasn't going to have him continue to do work without knowing who's going to be paid or not. So at the moment, he has stopped working, but he had begun, again, in July, I forget the date that I sent a letter to the police, handing over the first 12 investigations. He's requested the police reports, reviewed the police reports, requested some other body cam footage, and have received some of it. So for as many frustrations as we all have, including myself, about what has been done and what hasn't been done, there is a clear trajectory of where we're going and getting that work done. Whether you folks want to continue to support it and fund it is up to you all, but that track record is there. And again, I wish we would have spent 6 times as much on Eugene because there's certainly not much work to be done.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Jose, you said you sent that email out. When was it? I'm just checking my emails.
If I'm not mistaken, September 1. I will look at it and re-forward it, but I sent it to the entire board. The subject line is investigator docs. If you search that, you'll probably find it.
Did anybody else get it? No, no.
Yeah, I can't find it.
Yeah, I don't have it.
I don't have it either.
Give me 1 second.
And were those invoices submitted to the city with the purchase orders? Because they don't have it either.
Looking it up in my email now. I saw it as recently as this morning, and so if folks don't see it, I'm happy to find it and re-forward it, because again, there's a document there that lists 215 hours and week by week exactly when, where, and how it was spent.
And who else interviewed for this investigative position?
There were no formal interviews. Again, I don't remember. There wasn't many people, but who else was it? It was somebody. I know I had a lunch with at least somebody else. But again, when I spoke to Sheila and I saw how good I thought she was, and Eugene. Now, something I'll tell you about Eugene. Again, my original thought was to go out of state. I didn't want to do it with people in state. But again, Eugene's record, who's actually very friendly with the police, I thought this board would appreciate, and has a track record of serving the community. I mean, how do you find somebody who has lifelong relationships with both of those things to do this work?
Since he has all those qualifications and connections, why don't we put that position up for a formal hiring?
I'm very happy you asked that, because the budget that we have does not include a line item for a full-time investigator. The budget we propose does. However, since we don't have a budget at this moment, we haven't been able to go forward with that. But that was my very first. That was my very first thought, to transition it into a full-time position. And if you look at the biennial report, it shows you my plan for spending, and that was one of the things I proposed. So I'm looking at the email now, 9/1/2020 at 7:18 a.m. I don't know what happened, if folks didn't receive it, but I will forward it right now to our board. And this is an example. Like, I want to be honest with you guys, and I just want to distinguish: are there things that I've done that the board or didn't do that the board needed me to do? Absolutely. So I don't want you guys to give me some slack here. And if there's anybody who's insinuating that I'm not trying to share these documents, I'm looking at them right now. And if there was some technical glitch that folks didn't get them, give me a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because let's be honest. So you should all have it now, investigative docs.
It just came through, first time I've seen it.
But it's time stamped for September 1st. So, I mean, something happened, but.
I need a moment to grab my laptop charger before this thing dies. If you all will excuse me for a second.
Okay.
Take your time.
All right. And we're back.
Jose, was that provided to the city? I mean, usually, like with Sheila's billing, there's a detailed invoice and then there's a check paid. So was that documentation also provided to the city? Because they had said no.
What I just sent to you now?
Either what you just sent to us now, or as you requested a check for, $3,000, was there an accompanying invoice with the detail?
No.
No? Okay, who's using a stapler?
Jose, when you provide information to the finance department for these invoices, do they ask for detailed invoices or is it just a baseline?
Never.
Okay.
There's nothing in writing anywhere that requires my submit a line item budget to these folks.
Susan, do you think that we should moving forward, we provide that detailed invoice, or we at least get that detailed invoice from Para's perspective, or at the very least provide it for the city so we have some sort of detailed record of invoices moving forward?
I mean, that usually would just be kind of a standard operating procedure that you submit an invoice with the backup as to what it's paid for. And I thought that's the way that the city operated, and that was my understanding that it was. And whether there was some snafu where they didn't catch it, I don't know. Then that's not my concern. But
I'm just trying to figure out, just getting clarification.
I think it would, this is Panita, sorry. I think it would be helpful just to see these at our board meetings, just to have a record of these invoices. So these are some of the things in areas of improvement that I'm suggesting, like those emails that Jose, for whatever reason, we didn't receive, at the board meeting. These are opportunities to discuss. And so that's an area of improvement that I think, would be valued. And these are some of the line items, like what Susan was saying, we could discuss at the board meeting. Just a suggestion.
I would love for you to email that to me.
Got it. Better write it down before I forget.
Is that it in regards to the discussion about Mr. Montero's performance?
Just to clarify, it was about invoices, not his performance,
I'm sorry, about the invoices, excuse me.
certainly.
Just had a quick question. So some of the, I was taking a look at some of the invoices. Was the items that were over 5,000, was that approved by the board? Because I think, wasn't it 5,000, if somebody can correct me? I think any line item that was above 5,000 had to have, was it the board approval?
Yeah, so I mentioned that a little bit earlier. I certainly, again, I say this as sincerely as possible. I remember there being a vote on it. I looked at all the agendas and all the minutes. I haven't found it. If there isn't, and it was just some mental lapse, in no way, shape, or form that I mean to go around the board. That is a significant amount of money, and I certainly meant to. Again, I haven't missed anything that bad. I make little mistakes, but that was a pretty big one. And I remember having this conversation and explaining that because we were getting to a point where we were actually going to start this work, or at least we thought we were, we needed to make that sort of investment. And so moving forward, obviously, be careful with that if we do decide to do that again. And to the extent that there was not a vote on it, by no way was that intentional or malicious in any way.
So is that it in regards to the discussion about the invoices in regards to Eugene?
For me, I'm all done. I've said what I needed to.
Does anyone else have anything to say? Miss Ray? Miss Ray?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It's not so much about the invoices on either or the parties, but Jose, may I ask, were you the only person who hired these two people? Was there a committee or any other board member present in the hiring of Mr. Eugene and Miss Sheila?
Hubbard.
Okay, Miss Hubbard.
They did come to a meeting and speak before the board, and I'm trying to remember what the vote was. I know the board did take a vote to them in some regard. Ultimately, I know under the statute, it's my position that hires these people or doesn't hire these people, but I'm sure you folks remember too, meeting them at the board meeting, having them present, and then the board taking a vote, if you will.
You are totally correct in that response, sir. But what I'm asking, the same process with you, when we hired you. The board talked about the executive director. The board also had a hiring, and I'm going to use the word very lightly, committee of people who wanted to be on that process of going through the process of hiring different applicants who came before us. Then we came back and had a final decision. As you know, you yourself, sir, had a second interview. I was just asking and wondering in the back of my head at this point, was that process done with them too? I mean, I don't want to assume no, because that's what I'm feeling. And I'm not saying your judgment on the two people is incorrect. But again, to me, that's part of protocol. And that right there kind of worries me. I know you may have the final decision at the end of the day, sir. But again, it's just a little bit of protocol. Thank you. Just appreciate it.
Yeah, there was no committee to hire those people. I think I'm going to kind of guess this next part I'm about to say. I think the reason why there was a committee put together to hire me is because you had no staff at that point to hire any staff. And once you did hire me, the full-time position, it was up to me ultimately to hire those people. And so that's why there was no committee to do that the second time around.
I don't think that was it, but just to answer that particular portion of your statement, Jose, I don't think that's what occurred.
So please enlighten us then.
Well, when we hired you?
Or whatever it is that you think that I said that's not true.
No, what you said was, I don't think you had a staff or we had the people in place to hire these other people. And I'm saying that wasn't the case because you were the first hire we made. So clearly we would have staff to make hires. Okay. But what I think Ms. Ray is saying is that the protocol and process that she at least would expect is that there was a process or procedure about, and this is, I think it's come up in other questions or statements, that, what was the process in bringing any of these people in? Was it an open bid? Did we have other resumes? Were other people looked at and considered? Were things compared in terms of people's experience? And as I said to you earlier, I'm not saying that this would not be the final decision or the final pick that was made, but I think what Ms. Ray was just saying, what I'm concerned about is how do these picks get made, period, et cetera. And then you just said, I don't think we had the staff in place to make those judgments. So you did.
And I was just saying, I don't think that's correct because the staff was there to hire you first. So if you were the first pick, that staff was already in place. So that's why I was clarifying the second half of that statement. I said, no, the staff was in place at the time because we hired you, and that's all I left it at.
And Mr. Montero, as far as I know, was the only individual who was brought in as a prospective candidate for this investigative position. I don't think that there was any other, or there were any other individuals that were presented to us in similar fashion to the position that was put forward for the strategic planner. We only had one individual who seemed to be selected for that, and that individual.
There was only one individual who submitted a bid.
If I could finish my comments, Mr. Batista, thank you. There was one individual, as you state, that submitted a bid, and then we requested for that to be resubmitted for bid, and we have yet to hear anything about whether or not that was resubmitted or if anybody else has applied for that position. And so we just want to make sure that we're getting the best qualified candidates, not individuals who, as you said, Ms. Hubbard was recommended by someone. She's highly qualified. Mr. Montero was, I don't know, brought in. He's supposed to be highly qualified. The other individual who applied for the strategic planning position, it's just that we keep getting one person. So I think that if we have a variety of candidates that we can look at, then we can make better decisions.
It sounds like the hiring process needs to be a part of the larger email that we're going to put together for the governance and other structures, and operation structures. So I'll make note of that. But if anyone has any strong feelings about how that system should work, please send me an email.
Thank you, Ms. Swearingen. Is that it in regards to the discussion about the invoices and the hiring? Does anyone else have comment? Yes, no?
No comment.
No, I think everything's, going to be, like Elise was saying, part of adjustments made later. So,
okay. So I guess we'll move on to our next agenda item.
Mr. Vice Chair, we have item 2, 6, and 7 left. Where would you like me to go?
We can go to item number 6.
Item number 6 is presentation and discussion by Susan Dorita relative to proposed amendments to the Providence External Review Authority bylaws.
I'd actually like to make a motion to table that item until we develop this whole process plan.
So motion to continue.
Does anyone second that motion?
Second. Oh, sorry.
Second.
I think it was first seconded by Ms. Swearingen. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any discussion? The motion carries.
Mr. Vice Chair, we need to move to item 7 or item 2.
We can move to item 2, please.
Item number 2, Executive Director Report regarding recent events relative to Providence External Review Authority.
The only thing I was going to say in that report was already said in previous comments, so we can move past that one.
Okay.
That leaves us with item number 7, discussion and vote to continue investigative consulting services.
Ms. Dorita.
Yes, as part of this discussion, I would like us to investigate hiring a full-time person through the vetting process, usually through the city of Providence. Instead of having consulting services, to have a full-time vetted properly investigator.
And then that way we could actually get a full-time investigator and an investigative staff. So I think that would make sense. Does anyone want to second that motion?
I second.
All in favor? Oh,
Aye.
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 Wait, hold on. Ms. Swearengin, you had a
I
question?
just have a question. I'm sorry. I just have a question.
okay.
So if we are moving to theoretically hire a full-time investigator, what does that happen to the current contracted investigator? Because Jose made some questions about whether or not Eugene was going to continue work based on some different conversations. I don't know. I'm just asking.
The current investigator would have to put in for that role just like anybody else.
Okay, but I mean, like tomorrow there's an investigation. Like what happens? I'm just asking.
He could continue in that role until we started the hiring process. And then if he was not chosen, then that investigation will be picked up by whoever was hired as the full-time investigator.
Okay, I just didn't know the succession plan. That's all
Oh,
I just had concerns about.
It's totally understandable.
Just one question. Is this investigating if we need one or,
Just
you know,
you mean,
yeah, I mean, I guess my question is, not that I'm some sort of fiscal hawk or anything, but I'm just trying to figure out, I get the need of an investigator, but we're just starting to get off the ground. So I just don't know how much actual work, and this is going to be part of, you know, the package here that we're trying to reconstruct, because we know we have, I think, like, I don't know how many complaints we have currently, but how much work, I mean, do we have work for a 40-hour week, real work, or like, what do we, and that's not an insult to Eugene or anyone, I'm just curious, you know, like how many things do we have going? What's the protocol? What can we get? You know, so far I've been to a meeting, and someone's not giving me anything, regardless of what the situation or circumstances surrounding that. I'm just wondering, you know, do we have enough work for a full-time investigator right now? You know, I mean, that was just my only question. I do know that there will be a need for one, but I'm just trying to figure out, like she was saying, does that mean we go look at one right now? Do we analyze what work we actually have or Eugene's been doing to see whether or not that is enough work for a full-time person? Or I'm just curious, that's all.
I think that totally makes sense. I think that we should do an analysis of how much work is actually being done. And I mean, I really don't think it's necessary for an investigator to repetitively meet with the police to talk about investigations. I think the PCPRA pretty well stipulates what the role of an investigator is, what the role of the board is, and what the authority of the board is. To continue to go back and forth and have a discussion, to me, is somewhat ridiculous. I think that we should just look into what we need to look into as far as who we should hire, and then go from there. I think we should get a group of candidates submitting applications or resumes and then move forward. Yes, Mr. Batista.
Yeah, I'll just say this for the record, not that any of you have to listen to me or anything that I say, but as I've said before, I don't, as far as I know and what the city has told me and the people that I've spoken to, I don't think we can hire a full-time investigator. I mean, I'll check there's something called a budget book. When they pass a budget, they don't just give you money, but they give you the specific positions that you can hire. And if that position that you want to hire is not in that list, you can't hire that person. And so I'm not sure that we have an investigator position in the budget book right now. And so, but I'd be happy to get that information for you folks and give it to you all. I know we had done some work in terms of trying to build the job description and the pay grade for what a full-time investigator would look like. And we were proposing that for when we have the next budget. I know that work was being done, but I'll check in on whether it's even a functional possibility to go forward and hire that person. Just wanted to share that.
Even if we can't hire someone full-time, we could at least get some resumes and look at some other individuals instead of just having one person. Because if we're looking to upscale and have a group of individuals working on behalf of the board, we should still have some people that we can look to in the bullpen, so to speak.
Are you asking for a contractor in that regard then, Machiste, or more of a full-time employee? Because the job description and the contractor is going to be two different sort of departments within the city.
I would imagine we could do both. We can look at resumes. We can have more individuals that we're looking over. We have one individual who was brought into the organization, and that's supposed to be the end all be all of investigations. I don't know if he's the end all be all of investigations. There could be someone who's better. And so if we just have this one guy who was brought in and we haven't looked beyond that, I don't think it makes sense to stick with this person and keep elevating them to the status of Sherlock Holmes when we haven't looked at anyone else.
Well, Mr. Vice Chair, again, my suggestion would be that we just, I mean, we can do either or, whatever the board is trying to decide right now, but I think an analysis needs to be done. I would think before we make an offer, at least to a full-time person, because if we don't have, if we go, what's the work week going to be? What am I doing? And we don't really have that answer. We're still trying to figure out if we have 20 hours of work. I mean, I'm just saying, I guess if I was working a job and I was being paid 40 hours for doing 20, but I'm just saying that we should know how much work this is. And maybe it turns out to be 80 hours. I don't know, but I'm just saying that I think an analysis would be helpful regardless of where we end up to know. And this, again, if we set up the protocols, the practices, I think we'll have a little better idea of how much work should be done. I think then you can even talk about pay scales a little bit more competently. If this looks like this is going to be an incredibly difficult or, just crazy time consuming situation, then that should be taken into consideration as well. I just want to make sure that we're, on our end, we're putting out it's not a product, but the best product we can based on the information we have at the time, that's so.
I agree.
And Mr. Vice Chair, I can confirm that if the position is not in the budget, you cannot fill that role. So if it's not in this current budget, but in the upcoming budget, you won't be able to fill it until the upcoming budget is passed. Just for some context.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And that probably gives us time to develop this whole job description and whatnot.
That gives us opportunity to not only develop the job description, but to figure out how much time is being spent on actual investigations and all the other information that we want to gather. So that works. Does anybody on the board have an issue with that?
No,
Mr. Cohen?
I think,
Oh, sorry, Ms. Pilave. Ms. Pilave?
Who's
Sorry.
going?
Ms. Pilave?
oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said something. I'm losing it. I totally agree with what Mike is saying. It makes sense to do some analysis, perhaps at I don't know if we have items at the next board meeting or how, if Jose could do some analysis and present that to us at the next board meeting or the following board meeting, just to see what time is being spent, and then perhaps look into if there is room in the budget to hire, a full-time investigator. That's all valid points. So that's what I suggest.
Mr. Cohen?
I think we need to keep Mr. Montero on board, because if not, we stall the process. So right now, the only game in town is Mr. Montero for the board. So I think we need to keep him doing what he's been doing until we get to the point where we need to decide, is it going to be an on as needed contract type person, or is it going to be a full-time person? Is there going to be enough work to pay a full-time person, or is it going to be a full-time part-time person, or however it comes out?
I agree with that. I actually mentioned that we should keep him on until we were looking at some other individuals and made a decision on what we were going to do. But thank you, sir. What is our next agenda item?
So, Mr. Vice Chair, there was a motion and a second, and discussion ensued, but there was no call for all in favor, opposed, or abstention.
Sorry, I got sidetracked by all the discussion.
Motion.
Come again,
I
Mr.
did
Rita?
not actually make that as a motion. So I don't. somebody.
You did not?
No, so I think somebody turned it into a motion.
This is,
I don't think I did.
I,
Sue, can you make a motion or whatever that was? I think is what people are asking.
Okay, so I'll change this around because I didn't do that. So I'm gonna make a motion that we explore hiring an investigator. And that leaves it open as to whether it's a full-time, part-time, whatever.
Mr. Rita, can I just get clarification from the law department, because the agenda item is discussion and vote to continue investigative consulting services.
Right, so you need to just vote whether or not you're continuing it with Eugene. I don't really, I mean, you could make another motion to collect resumes or have Jose or I don't know, maybe just ask Jose to check into whether or not it's even a budget item. But right now the motion should be voting on the agenda item, which is to continue the services of Eugene.
Can the motion then state that we vote to continue services until such a time as we've reviewed our investigative options? Does that work?
It should just be you're making a motion to continue investigative services, or you just, you know, continue the item. That's an option too.
Okay. So then I'll make a motion.
Jillian, can you amend the line item to say motion to continue investigative services subject to analysis of job position, I don't know, and further discussion or something like that? Is that acceptable?
Yep, that would work. Yes, that would work.
Okay. Motion made.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Discussion? The motion carries.
And Jillian, do they now need to approve item 7 as amended?
Well, are you saying because the agenda item, because the motion doesn't read exactly what the agenda item says?
Correct.
Yeah, I guess somebody should make a motion to amend the agenda item
Right.
to fit
Did
the
that.
motion that was just made. Yeah. So amend the agenda item.
Yeah, I made that motion. And then, so I guess what the clerk's asking is we move to accept the agenda item as amended.
I'm sorry.
Nope.
The agenda
Right.
item as accepted.
Second.
Who seconds it? Mr. Fontaine or Ms. Swearingen?
Is Ms. Swearinger.
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Discussion? Motion carries.
Mr. Vice Chair, I know that we didn't have a board chair for item number 1. I kind of read it and we kind of skipped over it. So other than that, there are no other items on the agenda.
Very well. Do we have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Seconded. Third.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Discussion? Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Be well.